Hello, welcome. This is the second VLS Spring fork that I've got. It's a slightly different version. The travel's a lot shorter. The brace though is still the same. I believe that this one is probably a older version. The reason I think that is underneath you'll see that there's a nut instead of an Allen bolt, hex bolt. On the top, the access to the interior is through these plasticky caps. Not as nice as the longer travel VLS Spring that I've got. You'll notice that it's someone's put marine at the front, so I think that, or marine, someone's probably used this on a marine bike at one point. There were two versions of this fork for the 994 version for the previous video that I did. I'm imagining there was maybe for this one as well. So one was with elastomers and one was with springs inside. This one in particular seems to have a lot of play. It's going up and down. It's very light as well, so I have a feeling it might be elastomers inside it. And when I say elastomers inside it, possibility that they're just dust now, and you might need to source some new ones. First thing we're going to do is lift up these plastic caps and have a good look what's inside. I already started removing one. I'm flashing my light inside. It looks like there's Allen bolts at the bottom. Let's begin by removing these nuts. Looks like the Allen bolts are number 4, so we're going to put an extension socket drive inside and reach all the way down inside. So if you look, the plunger bolt's actually going all the way to the other side, and it was just that nut holding everything in place, and as you can see it's now disappearing while I turn on the other side with the socket. They now appear to be undone. Hopefully I'm just going to be able to pull this off. These plunger bolts are really corroded. Hopefully we can clean that up. I'm trying to knock out the elastomer. They're just not falling out. So I'm going to put some WD-40 in here. Maybe it will help it slide. Next day, I finally managed to remove the parts from one side. I had a bit of a difficulty removing these seals. And the reason for that is that there was so much dust and gunk on the top here that I couldn't figure out how to remove these bits, because before you could even remove the kind of like the plastic elastomer caps inside here, you had to take this part as well, because otherwise the diameter was too small to be able to remove those bits. So I'll show you what there was in the end. It's only when I started to break this this part of the sill that I realized that this was starting to turn. It was turning, and I noticed this ring. I thought this was part of the fork itself, like the whole unit, but no, it wasn't actually. This was being held down by a tiny little snap ring, and the snap ring you just could not see. It's actually in a ridge on the top of the fork, which I'm about to show you now. So you'll see here it's really hidden away, really tightly against the edge. The elastomer is still stuck inside. I managed to get some of it out. I'm going to begin doing this one here. It was very difficult as well. I needed to get an Allen key. I stuck it inside at an angle to be able to push some of the stuff out. Eventually I got everything out with the help of a bit of hot water and keeping and pushing from underneath. What came out were these spacers, so that might give us an idea of the elastomer sizing that we're going to need to find and replace. There's 4 of them, so I'm guessing there was four elastomer bits on each leg, something like that, or maybe 3. I'll figure it out.
After much deliberation, it quickly became apparent that it made no economical sense to search for very specific sized elastomer and a certain hardness as well. So I decided to take some parts from junk forks and do a melange of springs and elastomers. We're going to test it out, and this here I'm currently making is a spring for the fork. I need to hollow it out though to allow for the adjuster rod to enter and go through. Next thing is trying to guesstimate the amount of elastomer that we're going to need. So this is the top tube, and the kind of like the rod that holds everything together is going to go into it and seat roughly around about down towards here. So we've got a little bit of spacing there. And if I remember, this plastic cap was seated like this. So we've got a bit of a thickness that we need to take into consideration. So roughly, let's say here. And I've been a little bit more accurate. So we've got around about 14 millimeters to take in consideration for the threading, spacing, etc. The rod itself appears to be around about 12.5 centimeters in total. So now let's reduce the elastomer and the spring. It's 57 and 0.5. We've got 11 to work with, so it gives us, I think it's 53.5 left. So even at 53.5, we'll just say 54 for the elastomers. And I'm not sure whether I should just add on a little bit or less. Maybe make it 55. Let's make it 56 for the elastomer, and we can always reduce it after. I've cut some, by no means very precisely. I'm using a very sharp knife. Just to add on, I think I forgot to mention this. The only thing I could find cheaply were these, and they came up to 75 hardness, 75A sure. I think I can't remember how it's the correct terminology. But yeah, these were the cheapest ones, and this is the reason why I'm actually using a spring, because I just find these are really hard, and maybe the spring's actually going to make it a bit more usable. Something else that I failed to mention, the original dust seals were completely destroyed, so I needed to find some new ones. The sizing, however, was a bit of an issue. I couldn't find anything in 26.4 times 35 times 7, so I ended up having to get something slightly smaller, 26 times 35 times 7. I don't think that's going to be a big issue, but we will find out. Alright, well, first thing we're going to do is put the rod through. So we have these type of plastic bumpers and a tiny little seal. Let's put a little bit of grease on them. Both of those are going to go through the top tubes, and they'll both come out the other ends. Of course, you can put these on after if you've removed the tubes from the top tubes from the crown. I'm just doing this because it's easier for me. And now I'm going to put the snap ring, the dust seal, and there's actually a spacer before the dust seal, and then finally the type of plastic bushing. At the bottom here you have these type of plastic bushings that wrap around the lower half of the top tubes. And then after you have this form of spacer, and it has one little bit there in the middle that's going to seat into the top tube, or the bottom half of it anyway. Now all these parts I've put Teflon grease on them. Yeah. Working in this position is not ideal, it's just for the camera work. But the next part we're going to have is our spring, and then we're going to have my two elastomers that I cut, and between them a spacer that was previously inside the fork. It is going to add on a little bit more height though, adding that spacer, but hopefully we can squash it down and we'll see if it works out. Not the easiest of position to work in, it was probably easier to do this one tube at a time. So I've put lots of grease now on the outside here and on the inside of the lower tubes, and now we'll just need to slide it all in. Now for those bushings we might need to bash them in a little bit to slide them in properly. Okay. So it looks like they've gone in. I've just put now the extender with the, I think it's a number, what is it again, number 4 Allen key wrench, and we're going to start screwing that metal rod into the bottom here on each side. And you'll see them coming out on the other end. I'm guessing those will need to be adjusted or held down when I put the bolt on. I think this also works as an adjustment. I think it's that, I'm guessing anyway. So initial fill, they're okay. Now we need to get the bushings seated down into the lower tubes, and then we need to push down the dust seal and then put the clip back on. So I'm going to put some grease onto it, and hopefully I can do this by hand and not have to remove the tubes. And then there's this metallic spacer. And then there's these snap rings. Now I am a little bit skeptical about those snap rings being able to hold up the seals because they're so thin. I could maybe use the ones that I got from a RockShox, which are nearly the same size.
Back on the stand, let's start tightening down the parts.
And on the threading that's protruding from the kind of adjustment rod, we'll have that nut, one on both sides. And what you eventually do is you'll kind of adjust them using the longer driver and holding the nut at the bottom. Testing it out, you can see that the fork doesn't have a ton of travel, maybe a bit more once you put it on a bike. I don't think that's a really bad thing. It depends how you want to use the fork. A lot of people seem to look for rigid, hard forks for one to actually raise the bike a bit. But I actually like the fact that these suspension forks are hard because it still gives you the nice look of an old retro MTB, but it also removes the suspension, and it also gives you the cable stopper if you're using canty brakes, sorry. So all in all, I'm pretty happy. At least it's usable. We could go back obviously and put some softer elastomers, but I'm not going to do that. So thank you for listening. I hope this gave you some ideas, and until next time, peace out.